If you haven't read Blom, yes, that's how it's pronounced, Blom, it's gonna transport you into a completely different dimension. The story is set in a future where humanity is almost extinct, overtaken by cyborgs called the Safeguards, designed to eradicate them. And the world is this vast, endlessly expanding artificial megastructure called the city, constantly being built and rebuilt by these rogue machines. And you're just this tiny ant in this vast universe whose singular goal is to eliminate you. And after a few hours of reading, you're filled with this feeling that's not quite fear or despair. It's just very unsettling. A portion of this video is sponsored by Wayfair. There's something about this place that feels off. It's familiar, but it's strange. It's a real place, but it's like a dream. You expect to see people, but there's no one around. Just a total population of you. And we call this liminal space. It's a transitional space between two states, between two spaces, between A and B. Spaces that don't have a function of its own. Kind of like a hallway or a corridor, but it's endless. So you're in this perpetual state of transition. In Blom, the main character, Kili, walks and walks and walks, looking for this thing called the net terminal gene, which is kind of a computerized control system for the city. And apparently it's the key to regaining control of this world, which the humans were able to do a long, long time ago. But the problem is, he doesn't know where it is or who has it. And remember, it's a world that keeps expanding and changing. And in the wise words of Riser and Umemoto, in a world that keeps moving, the nomad is the one standing still. The exact size of the city is unknown, but we could speculate. Here, Kitty enters an empty spherical room, 143,000 kilometers in diameter, which is the size of Jupiter. Tsutomu Nihei also suggests that the city is actually a growing Dyson sphere, and the approximate circumference is the size of Jupiter's orbit, which is roughly 1.6 billion kilometers, which completely engulfs our solar system. It's just really hard to wrap your head around. And what you realize is that it's really a story of a city, told through the perspective of a tiny ant. The way we understand the world is in relation to our bodies, and the size of a building in relation to the average human body is called scale. And a foot is based on the average human foot. And Corbusier's modern man, which standardized a lot of building components, was based on the ideal human body, ensuring that our built environments are comfortable and safe to navigate for the average human. But in Blom, buildings are constructed by these AI that are not bound by human bodies, and so you see these environments that are completely out of scale and proportion, creating this alien environment that is so incomprehensible to us, and ultimately, it leads to this feeling of being utterly alone and insignificant. But there are aspects of the environment that's familiar, but in a twisted version. Here, you have something that reminds you of a Mayan temple with this long central staircase, which was, of course, symbolic of this ascent from the earthly realm to the higher sacred plane. And it inspired awe and reverence, and people would worship these monuments because they symbolize the heavens and the cosmos. All of this is a very human concept, but here it's warped into something grotesque and inhumane with this scale and these glorified statues of the safeguards. By twisting our symbols of culture into tools of oppression. And it's exactly this familiarity that makes it so unsettling. The author, Tsutomu Nihei, actually worked in construction. In an interview, he said he's seen construction sites so many times that he can draw things like structure or piping just from his memory. And when you have a good foundation, pun intended, deconstructing things come a little bit more naturally. He takes the stairs, but they lead to nowhere, and corridors, but they twist in a way that doesn't really make sense, and spaces connect in weird ways. And scenes like this remind you of Escher's drawing, a world where normal laws of gravity doesn't really apply. He was also a big fan of H.R. Geiger, who, by the way, also studied architecture, and is known for creations that are kind of like nightmares. He blends organic and mechanical forms to create these horrific creatures. And so you can see how Nihei also combines these biological elements in his environments, but especially in his character design. Before we continue, a quick message from our sponsor, Wayfair. You probably know Wayfair is a website where you can buy affordable, chic-looking furniture, but did you know that they also have an educational YouTube channel? They have a new series called A Style is Born, where they discuss how certain styles came to be. They break down the history of the style from the social and economic conditions and why it's making a comeback. And I think when you understand the context behind something, you can make it so much more interesting. The host is Alexander Gator, who explores the origins of design styles all over the world, like the Japanese floor culture or Portuguese tiles. And in the latest episode, she dives into the American Tuscan kitchen, especially compared to the actual kitchens in Tuscany. I would highly recommend it. It's really well produced and well researched, and it's pretty fun to watch. So yeah, go subscribe to their channel. I'm gonna leave the links in the description. There's an architect whose work reminds me a lot of Blanc, Lebbeus Woods. His work has the same kind of chaos and scale, but despite being completely unbuildable, these ideas were actually for the real world. This is Sarajevo during the Bosnian War, which lasted 1,425 days, the longest siege of a capital city in the history of modern warfare, resulting in thousands of deaths. Since then, the city has rebuilt itself, and this is what it looks like now. But this was the proposal for Sarajevo by Lebbeus Woods. What the hell? But for him, these were provocations or principles that could help rebuild without erasing the memory of the war. Because he felt like a lot of these rebuilding efforts had this desire to get back to a normal and forget the trauma and the suffering and the destruction, when in reality, nothing's the same. It's not possible to get back to a normal. And he believed in a situation like this, we have to create a new normal by using existing buildings and using them to create something completely different and unfamiliar, both functionally, formally, and symbolically. Here, he created these underground structures with secret tunnels and living laboratories that intersect into each other. And it was this tactic of informally reconnecting East and West Berlin. Here, he's injecting these new, fragmented spaces into existing buildings, and he calls them free spaces. Spaces without any predetermined function, as a physical and symbolic way of disconnecting from the world. They connect with other free spaces virtually, creating these pockets of resistance. Lebbeus Woods is one of those figures that you become obsessed with when you go to architecture school, but as soon as you leave academia, he very quickly fades into a fond memory, but a very distant memory, of a time when you had unlimited creativity and optimism. Because his work was so far on the theoretical end, and to build something like this in real life would be completely insane. Every piece is custom, and you would need special trades, and it would be extremely expensive. And it definitely wouldn't be the kind of free space or a construction for the people, by the people. And his writing was also extremely enigmatic. For example, the polyvalent spatialities of post-structuralist architecture challenge the hierarchical modalities of classical design, embracing instead a heterarchical framework that accommodates the fluidity of the human experience. But it's not just the descriptions. The spaces themselves it's a little hard to imagine how it would be inhabited by a person.
But I can't help but wonder how much more impact his work could have had if he'd created his world from the point of view of a person who was in it.
Kind of like in Blom. Because I think Lebbeus Woods made some of the biggest contributions to the discourse of architecture by reintroducing the importance of this pure act of making and the meaning behind architecture, especially in the context of the modernist mantra, form follows function.
This is the foundation of architectural training today.
Form follows function? It means that a building's main purpose is the function, and the form, or the beauty, is secondary. Makes a lot of sense, right? But it's also an idea that originated more than 100 years ago from a very specific cultural and historical context. It was right after the war, and they had to rebuild quickly and efficiently, and they wanted nothing to do with the ways of building in the past, which they deemed expensive and kind of elitist. It was an attempt to create a more democratic form of architecture in the time of massive change. And before this, for centuries, humanity had largely operated under the idea that architecture is a combination of commodity, firmness, and delight. But now, it's commodity plus firmness equals delight. It's kind of radical, right? But something about it stuck. Maybe it's that now we live in a society obsessed with productivity, and the primary goal of buildings is to maximize returns, not enhance the human experience. It could also be that this is just a reflection of our capitalist society, where the main criteria for success is financial viability, rather than human-centered design. But we do have way better quality of life than ever before. So I'm not saying that we should just stick to what we know, but maybe it's time for us to revisit what architecture could be. I mean, things look very different now than 100 years ago. Both Nihei and Woods used architecture not for function, but as a tool for expression.
But Nihei was able to give us a glimpse into what it would feel like to be living in this immense liminal environment. A space just for your mind that comes alive in a way that no physical reality ever could.
Because the mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. So how do these spaces make you feel? Let me know in the comments. If you guys want to dive deeper into this topic, we have our research booklet, and we also have our liminal space merch. I'll leave the links to both of those in the description. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!
You got my attention, baby. Can't make a move like a child, a star for love. I stay there as long